Our next presenter is Professor Majd Sarvi, speaking on putting data into action. Professor Sarvi is the Chair in Transport Engineering, Professor in Transport for Smart Cities, and the Program Director for the Transport Technologies at the University of Melbourne. Majd is the founder and director of AIMS, the Australian Integrated Multimodal Ecosystem. AIMS is the world's first and largest connected urban testing ecosystem for implementing and testing emerging connected transport technologies at large scale and in a complex urban environment, which involves over 40 partners from government and leading Australian global industry partners. He has over 23 years of professional academic research experience in the areas of traffic and transport engineering. His research is multidisciplinary with an international outlook and both theoretically and applied in nature. His fields of research cover a range of topics, including connected multimodal transport networks, crowd dynamic modeling, and simulations and network vulnerability assessment and optimization. Majd, over to you.
Thank you, Leanne, for having me, and thank you for a very generous introduction. I'm very happy to be here with Phil and John talking about this very interesting topic. And, you know, the two speakers before me painted a very nice picture of, you know, the importance of data and how this can allow us to understand the transport system, you know, behavior, and also, you know, a bit further to what John mentioned about the travelers' behavior, you know, considering the message going to them is very interesting. Sort of, you know, insight. I thought, you know, as part of this conversation, broadening a little bit around this COVID-19 impact on transport and how this data can be really helping us to understand how to move forward. Because, you know, a different school of thought talking about, you know, quick recovery that is getting pretty much, you know, not very much support these days, and then delayed recovery and prolonged recovery, and all of them, you know, have significant ramifications for transport system, such as, you know, how to use public transport, you know, how to use, you know, supply chain, and then the car traffic, and then accident coming with it. And as you probably can imagine, you know, we started the COVID-19 with lots of pressure on our freight system. And the good news is that because we didn't have much car traffic, you know, the trucks had the road to themselves, they could move around, you know, when we needed them. And that was really also a good chance for supply chain sort of, you know, operator to looking at the stabilization of, you know, their fleet and, you know, how they need to operate. And again, I'm sure some of the data coming to, you know, to hand would be very useful to look at it, you know, both from Phil and John. If you look at the sectors, you know, of a transport system, for example, how the freight moved around in terms of speed, in terms of where they basically reached out, and also in terms of frequency of you know, the movement around the network, that would be also very, very interesting for us to have a look from many perspectives. And then I would also like to talk about, you know, if we're reimagining what's going to happen in future, and how this kind of data can help us to address some of the questions that we have in hand would be very, very useful. You know, people talking about, you know, a competition now that goes to different sort of funding source, so where transport amongst many other sectors, you know, going to compete against, you know, let's say, you know, health, you know, for venture capital money. And, you know, we had, for example, you know, autonomous vehicle, very hot topic. Would be very interesting to look into the future and understand if they're going to be very again, you know, a big ticket, or, you know, other sort of, you know, sector going to come in, and basically, you know, that would be very interesting. For example, you know, we heard about car sale decline that happened during the COVID-19. Would be very interesting to understand how that's going to move forward, and understand, you know, the impact of that on our road network. We heard about, you know, what John and Phil was showing was very interesting in terms of a speed on our road network. I'm very interested, for example, if we have some data about the severity of crashes, because I don't have very solid evidence in hand, but I see around looking at the news, you see some devastating, very high speed crashes on the road with strong severity. Some of them, unfortunately, we witnessed in Melbourne in our road network. So it would be very interesting to look at, that relationship between the type of crashes, the severity of them, during the COVID-19, because that could be also a very good lesson for us. If we have such a thing, when the speed goes up, when we have, free road, what does that mean for, transport user? And is technology a way to manage those kind of, behavior? Is CITS, would be useful in that sense? What can be done? Especially for government, for companies that they like to invest in technology, would be also very, very interesting point forward. I think if we look at sort of, a connected automated vehicle safety benefit, then again, that would be a very interesting discussion for the government. Again, these are the type of vehicle that, can handle, this kind of condition. And then maybe there is a need to accelerate the introduction of connected vehicle and then autonomous vehicles. So I think is providing the transport community lots of opportunity and also way to get engaged. In terms of urban versus regional, I would be very interesting again to look at the data that TomTom, and Intelematics provided, to look at the trends in regional area. What happened in those areas in terms of, again, the speed, in terms of accident, in terms of the movement and reaching to different areas. I think would be very, very interesting to have a look. And basically, again, bringing the discussion back to ITS and CITS and connected automated vehicle would be very interesting. As I mentioned, you're going to be definitely looking to the future. Would be lots of competition over venture capital. Would be very interested to see if they're very, strongly like before supporting what happened in the past few years in artificial intelligence, supporting companies like Tesla and others, versus, this money going to go to artificial intelligence, for health and for example, other area that have the highest priority. And I'm also very interested in looking into the public transport movement. Phil showed some stuff about the bus, which was very interesting. We know that that's going to be a very, very huge sort of, concern for the government. People talking about 20% public transport capacity compared to normal. And what does that mean? What kind of data is needed that allows that kind of, capacity, getting to the hand, and what are the ways to work with the public? The messaging that John was talking about, positive, negative, how did come through? If you look at Melbourne, for example, we're just talking about it. We have some very good data on public transport, but for COVID, some of them are not good enough. So that again provides an opportunity for government to look at, the roadmap of technology, how to move, basically take advantage of this time to address some of the shortcomings. Shared mobility is another big ticket. We again hearing conflicting messages. Some people switching to car traffic, using more taxis, more Uber, more shared sort of, ride, and that put pressure on, road traffic. However, with discussion about the actual shared mobility event are more than, one person, in addition to the driver in a car, people might be very scared of, because of the virus transfer to be sitting in those kind of, vehicle. So those discussion again, collecting some data and having some insight would be very, very interesting. We talked about road safety equilibrium disruption that is happening probably behind the scene, and looking at those sort of, stat would be very, very interesting. And then, we talked about, we saw some of the trend presented again by Phil and John about, recovery traffic congestion coming back to the road network. It would be very different probably, compared to what they had before COVID. What is the new normal? How to focus, as I suggested, on more CITS, ITS application to infrastructure to make sure we can handle this kind of disruption by adding more resiliency to our transport network, because this is the buzzword, everybody talking about it, and basically this kind of data could be very, very important, and the value of live data is going to be so important. So I mean, if we had any doubt that this live data is going to be very important, I think now people should have no doubt that this is going to be a most important sort of way to understand how to move people around the network, during this pandemic. So I would stop here and pass it to Leanne.
Thanks very much, Majd. I've just had a look. There aren't any questions on the Q&A board at the moment, but I am going to turn over to Ian, who is the MD and CEO of iMOVE. He has a few questions. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Leanne, and thanks to Phil and John and Majd for some really excellent insights. I'd like to start the questions in a way, taking a lead from Majid's comment, and reflecting that the whole COVID experience has taught us something about demand management. I was particularly interested in John's observations about the effect of positive and negative messages, but I want to take that first in the direction of, so when we look at the changes in traffic behavior that clearly is present and visible in your data, can we pull it apart and discern which sorts of travel has reduced? So for instance, can we discern in either of your data trucks as distinct from cars? Can we, and no, never mind that little white vans could be somewhere in between, but never mind, can we see big trucks? And if we could see big trucks, can we then make some inference about the relative effect on freight versus the effect on people movement? And while you're thinking about the answer to that, so let me add, can you also see buses? Can you see, and because the effect on public transport is going to be an important learning for the recovery process. So if we want to increase the movement of people progressively, but without increasing the traffic to the previous congestion level, we would need to somehow see and facilitate the utilization of public transport in the sense of more vehicles. We may not be able to get as many people on each vehicle, but nonetheless, we might need to improve the movement of the public transport vehicles. So Phil and John, perhaps Phil first and then John, if you could comment on your ability to discern different types of vehicles in your vehicle data.
Sure. So TomTom does differentiate between passenger cars and trucks. And the truck data is essentially from our telematics suppliers as probe data. So we know that the telematics clients are definitely in vehicles, trucks, but we do not know if they're light or heavy trucks, right? So we can do analysis on that in our historical data and separate out the different driving patterns between trucks versus passenger cars. The second part to your question was around different trip movements. And TomTom has a product called Origin Destination. And that allows us to understand trips across a city, across a state. So we can create different zones and we can analyze that like a year ago against now. And we can create different zones, like for example, it could be morning movements from all the suburbs of Melbourne into the CBD, or to the port, or even just movements across all different suburbs. And we can look at that as a matrix and look at that pattern for different times of the day or different periods between before COVID and during COVID. So we have that ability to see if there is trending and patterns and trying to understand, are people now not doing shorter trips, for example? You know, trying to stay away from the shorter commutes, although as one of my slides showed for skills for morning, we are seeing that that's increased. So maybe you want to be able to segment that part out and work around some of the other movements, especially the freight side. Okay.
You're on mute, Ian.
Ian, you're on mute. The joys of Zoom.
It's your mute. Ian, you're still on mute.
For the third time. John, what's the Intelematics experience like here?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. Similar what you described. Our program can be separated or categorized by trucks and passenger or cars, and we do have a bit more granularity in terms of the types of trucks. There is a bit of description on the size and the axis, etc. But again, a pro program, like any pro program, is a representation, is a sample of the total universe, right? So at the moment, we are working with some of the road authorities to create an estimation model that can be applied to the whole volume of vehicles on the road, and to be able to categorize the actual volume of cars on the road and categorize them between the different vehicle classes. So that's where we are towards. That's a very common question. It's a pretty frequent request we hear from our customers and partners. And on the second part of your question, similar origin destination model is being built, and a similar approach to apply across the whole universe, to be able to use that sample to validate against a model that represents a bigger part of the population or the vehicle universe in Australia. That said, the conversation I've been having with road authorities and the challenge they have moving forward is that with the social distancing, they can only use 30% of the capacity of the public transport, which doesn't really make it feasible to return to the life as it used to be. And I think the policy will have to take in consideration telecommute to try to bring a sense of normality, try to go back to the same behaviors at the moment without treatment and vaccine is not really feasible.
Thanks very much, John. We have a couple of questions. The first one is, does the COVID effect on traffic volumes have regional differences? Example, metro versus rural. And we're probably looking to Phil and John to give a TomTom and Intelematics view on if they are seeing metro versus rural differences. Phil?
I actually haven't done that analysis, but of course our data is right across rural just as much as urban, so it would be a very, very simple, straightforward analysis to do. I would be happy to actually do a little bit of that and report back through iMOVE. It would be very interesting. I guess, you know, are we going to see much difference in small towns? I'm not so sure. Are we going to see in regard to between towns to cities and movements across state? Obviously not interstate. And I suspect we will see some trends. But I think that would be quite an interesting exercise to do. So I'm more than happy to take that up in 1 or 2 states and have a look at that.
Thank you, Phil. We'll definitely hold you to that. John, do you have a comment on a regional or metro difference?
Yeah, similar to Phil, we haven't separated. We focus more in state by state, not without segregation of regional or metro. But again, I would expect the trends to be slightly different from metropolitan areas due to the characteristics of how the commerce is dispersed on regional areas. But yeah, I would be happy to be part of further analysis.
Thanks very much. Majd, do you have any comments on that difference based on your experience?
Unfortunately not, Leanne. I don't have any data to basically look at it, but yeah, it should be very interesting to have a look.
Thanks very much. We'll follow that up. Another question, many transport authorities have real-time passenger data available. In the past, they may not have been keen to share it. Now, it's just jumped up. Now, do you think that they'd have a different perspective on sharing real-time passenger data? Majd, do you have a view on that? Whether you
Yes, I mean, definitely that's true. There are some data, but I think also working with authorities, this COVID, as I kind of alluded to it, is some opportunity to look at, what are the gaps in our, technology roadmap, in our, the way that we work around public transport, and understand, for example, we have ticket data, but is that data real time, or is kind of like some delay? Because in this case, we're talking about, a few minutes delay. If we're talking about a day or half a day, that's not a real time data anymore. So that gives us an opportunity, and I think definitely, that comment about now that, the authority are maybe more sort of, eager to provide that data is definitely valid. I know that our Victorian government is very keen to work with industry and entrepreneurs and any companies that they can come in and help, with technology that allows, understanding passenger crowding in our public transport network, because that's a key in order to open up the public transport once we move to, to a little bit more normal condition.
Thank you. Next question. In Brisbane, we have found peak compression to occur. That's the opposite of peak spreading. The person asking is asking for your thoughts. Anyone on the panel?
For a start, I think the slide I showed on various cities around the world absolutely showed some of that. If you recall, like Beijing, we saw very narrow, very high peaks and very compressed from the historical of previous last year. I'm not an analyst to go and drill down, like Majd is probably the better person to go and do the analysis to actually understand why. But we saw this, and so we can look at various cities and we see that, yes, compression has happened for some reason. So it does show up in some of the results.
Yeah, I mean, I can just, again, this is my sort of opinion, is not based on any data that's Phil suggested. It might be because of the type of activity that happened during COVID-19. For example, we knew that most of the people with office work and sort of flexibility around what time to start, they took out of the network, and most of the sort of essential jobs that they need to start at certain time was allowed to use the network. So that might be attributing directly to the type of people that using the network, and I think I'm not quite surprised to sort of see that. So that's probably my opinion in that condition.
Thanks, Majd. Well, I've got one here about freight. Is de-identified telematics data available for research purposes, or can it be purchased? That's open to all the panelists.
From our perspective, yes, our data is licensable. So people are welcome to reach out to TomTom or to myself, and we can talk through the different licensing arrangements we have for access to our data. Essentially, in a very simple terms, it's licensed based on kilometers. So, and the number of queries you're going to do across a year.
And John, is that the same for Intelematics?
Yes, the data is available for licensing as well. We usually work on geographical covering model in terms of licensing. What we heard from the market is usually when they are looking to license this data, they want to analyze a very particular area. So we do on an area basis.
Excellent. And I think this is the last question we can take. Based on these insights, could the government and businesses use traffic data as a gauge or pulse check for economic recovery? This is open to all the panelists as well. Phil, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think it's a very good economic measure. As you see, the loading on the network and across the network and where those movements are, not just into industrial areas and the ports and airports, etc. It's a very, very good measure. You know, like one of the things I've done previously is measuring movements to and from international airports. And again, it's a very good measure from that perspective, again, from the ports. But just general traffic movement and freight movements definitely reflect the economic recovery or decline, whichever way it goes.
Excellent.
Can I add?
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely. And the reason being is economic data is a lag indicator, right? It comes afterwards. And the advantage of using movement data is that it's a lead indicator. It tells you where the economy is going to recover faster and which areas you should invest more or give subsidies. So I think we all believe that it's quite important data to be used in this post-pandemic environment.
Thank you, John. Majd, do you have a comment on the correlation to economic recovery?
I think as Phil and John mentioned, definitely is a correlation. And also, you know, when we discuss about the type of the peak, you know, the outreach risks, regional versus, you know, urban. And also I'm very interested to the, you know, lengths of the travel, you know, that, for example, our freight has done before, after. There are going to be lots of indication in that. And hopefully if you have some public transport data, again, that would be also very awesome, you know, in that kind of, you know, drawing the picture that we think going to happen.
Excellent. I'd like to thank our panelists, Phil, John, and Majd, for taking time out to be with us today. Hugely appreciated your insights and expertise. We'd also like to thank all the attendees for being part of the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. We'll be advertising when it'll be on. All the best and stay safe, and we will connect with you soon. Thanks very much.